Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and tonight we are talking about how to navigate the supernatural fandom. It's been 20 years. It's a vibrant fandom. It is still doing conventions and podcasts and fan fiction and get-togethers of all kinds in the US and abroad. It's pretty overwhelming. So as a fan, whether you are new to the show and have just discovered it, or have been around since early on or maybe the beginning, but just haven't waded into fandom waters, how do you find your way? How do you know where to go? How do you make your path through this rather strange and wonderful grouping of people? But before we get into that, let's let our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I've been a Supernatural fan since season 3. I started writing fanfic in 2012. Love Supernatural in many ways, and as Ellis Colton, I now also publish and write M&M romance.
Okay, Kristin.
Hi, my name is Kristin Jackson. I'm a graphic designer. I work mostly with people in the film industry. I've been a fan of Supernatural since the very first episode. I have been involved in fandom, though, more a little later in the seasons, maybe coming in to the fandom around season 6 or 7. That's when I first joined Misha online on Twitter. That was kind of my introduction, and so I've had to navigate that immense fandom through social media and then festivals and conferences and stuff.
Okay, Melissa.
I've been a fan since the night that the pilot aired back in 2005. And Kitty, who's currently off screen, has been a fan since 2020. Sorry. And I came kind of late to the official fandom. I was loving the show all on my own, blah, 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 because LiveJournal, which was my strongest connection to fandoms, had kind of started to fade out by the time that I really... It's not that I didn't always love the show, but I didn't really seek out community. And so it took a little bit to get to where I am now in terms of community. Held down the rabbit hole.
Yep. I fell in love with the show halfway through season 11 and binge watched 11 seasons for the start of season 12, and then became a certified obsessed fan. Not my first fandom, so I sort of knew where to turn over the rocks and where to go poking at things to find community. Certainly on social media, I found groups that were talking about Supernatural. I knew to look in the fan fiction places because I figured this would be primed for fan fiction. It certainly was. I wasn't on LiveJournal, but I'm very active on Facebook, and less now, but there is a vibrant community on that still remains on Twitter/X. So found that, and then knew where to look for. Are there conventions? Are there get-togethers? How do I find other fans? And so we can kind of talk about how you do that. But if you've been part of another, I came up through Star Trek fandom and Star Wars fandom, and fans build a lot of the same sort of things regardless of what they are in love with. So if you've been part of another fandom and you really enjoyed an aspect of that fandom, and now you are part of the Supernatural family, odds are pretty good that piece that you liked elsewhere, you can find it's probably already built and roaring along and might even be 20 years old. So it's not as mystifying as it may seem when you're just getting started. Carol, what was your, let's talk about, how did you tiptoe into the fandom once you knew this was going to be your home away from home and your new family? Carol?
I kind of flung myself into it. I was already reading fanfic for other fandoms, and I was on LiveJournal. I was very, 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 very active on LiveJournal. So when Supernatural finally kind of entered my world, I went looking for Supernatural fanfic on LiveJournal. And that was really active, vibrant, lots of activity, lots of things going on, met like a billion people. And from that, I mean, that's where I was for years, just years. And then at some point, as people began migrating more to Facebook, and I had Facebook, but I hadn't integrated those two worlds yet. But certainly Facebook became, there's a billion different supernatural groups on Facebook. I also had tried Twitter, backed away from Twitter, and then kind of like got dragged back into Twitter. And when I finally got dragged back into Twitter, I actually really liked it because, again, very vibrant, immediate discussions and activity, and people are like, live tweeting from places, and met a lot of new people again. And I really, really liked it for a long time. I'm no longer on Twitter, but most of the people I was active with on Twitter, I don't know if they're still on Twitter, but there has also now been a big migration to Blue Sky. So now there's a big supernatural community on Blue Sky. And I don't know if it's just, being on social media and being so comfortable on social media, to broaden my horizon to include supernatural into that was like very, very natural and easy. I really, I really thrived on having that interaction, talking with friends, and then going the further step of actually starting to meet friends face to face, going to conventions, meeting people. I don't know how far I'm going, if I'm going past the realm of this that you want to explore another.
No, no.
But, the first convention I went to, where I'd been to one convention, didn't know what I was doing. When I went to my second convention, I actually was going to meet people I knew from LiveJournal. And that was tremendously exciting, just tremendously exciting. Plus, again, met new people and made new friends. And the whole thing of actually having the opportunity to meet these people that I spend time talking with and sharing my fandom with, and, they with me, is just like amazing. It's like if you had, 100 pen pals. all over the all over the world, and then hey, you got to go to a pen pal big meetup, and there they are. I mean, here they are, and they're all people you've already established a connection with, plus they're sharing the same thing that you love, so you're speaking the same language. You're interested in the show, and then you're interested in the stuff that's grown from the show, and it's just really, really amazing. It broadened my world in ways that I couldn't even have anticipated. Uh, and frankly, has led me to the point where now, I finally took the plunge a couple of years ago to go ahead and publish my first book in romance, and I would never have done that without having gone through all my fandom experiences, all the writing I did for fandom, all the friends I made through fandom who like supported and helped, and Gail mentored, and so on. And so I cannot imagine what my life would be like right now had I not delved into the actual fandom world of Supernatural.
Okay. Awesome. Kristen?
Let's see, similar to Carol, I was kind of a step-by-step process in entering fandoms. But the first real entry wasn't really supernatural at all. It was Doctor Who. Back in the late 90s, there were things on the internet, which the kids today probably have never heard of, but they were sort of the very early stages of social media, and they were called lounges. And you would have an online website that would have different forums, different topics, and you can post in a topic. And I was part of the Gallifrey base, as we were all eagerly anticipating all the rumors of that Doctor Who was going to get a reboot. And so that was kind of my thing for quite a while. And then I also found that the show Firefly had a lounge and was actively, part of that lounge and that group as we anticipated the feature film that called Serenity. And one of the cool things about not necessarily about the Doctor Who, but about the online community for Firefly and Serenity was that Joss had been the person to set that up. And so he would sometimes just lurk or drop in, and some of the other actors would lurk and they would drop in and they would interact with the fans, and it was really cool. And so after Supernatural was became a TV show, I naturally went looking for a similar format. And the CW at that time had the online forum for the show, an online lounge that was part of the network. I think it might have been WB at first, WB, and then it sort of transitioned to CW. They took it over, but then they decided that they were going.
It melded with UPN.
UPN,
It
that's
was UPN,
it.
and
That was it. UPN
and they created
to the CW. Yeah, but then they decided they just didn't want to do that anymore. They wanted to move it over to, I think it was Facebook, and everybody was just freaking out. Because we had a different level of ability to interact in those lounges. And so that's when I learned that Twitter was becoming a thing, and Misha was going to do, he was going to set up an account. So I followed Misha to Twitter, and then I followed everybody who was communicating with Misha, and we sort of started building our Supernatural community from that spark. And that's actually what got me into the film industry, was that I was following Misha when he announced that he was going to be doing this little side project during the summer hiatus called Divine. And he was going to be one of the lead characters in Divine. And it was a show that was going to be put together by some of the behind the scenes crew during the summer. And so I just reached out to him. And I said, hey guys, by the way, did you happen to need a graphic designer in your little production here? And they were like, no, thanks, but we really don't need anyone doing art right now. And so I just kept pestering them for the entire summer until in the August, one of the guys, Ivan Hayden, had written me back, and he was like, hey, when you were asking if we needed a graphic designer, are you still interested? And of course I was like, hell yes. And so I kind of joined up at that point. And again, it was sort of like with Carole, my life had changed through that fandom process and combined with Supernatural. And since then, I followed everybody and we had such a great thriving community on Twitter/X for the longest time, but then I kind of fell away from that. And so now I'm more on, following off and on Blue Sky. And, going to a conventions, doing a TV/film feature film about the actual fandom itself. It's literally called Supernatural Fandom. I don't know if you could still buy the DVDs out there, but it was like a 10-part series, 2-hour feature film about all the aspects of the fandom. So whether it's, watch parties, the cosplay, the conventions, the fanfics, the charitable actions that the cast and crew take part in. So anyway, fandom, especially for Supernatural, is way more involved than maybe even something like Doctor Who. Doctor Who fans are legendary, but I think Supernatural hasn't beat when it comes to the amount of outside expression that they're involved in.
Melissa?
I blame John Hartness. Okay.
As you should.
As I should.
Captain Jack.
No,
Captain Jack.
no, John Hartness. Different,
Okay.
not Captain Jack. Although I am a Doctor Who fan, different. I was way involved in the Lost fandom on LiveJournal, but never really got into the fandom for Supernatural. Although I was a huge fan, I just never got connected with the fandom. And one day, I'm talking with a mutual friend of Gail's and mine, and he says to me, "Do you know Gail?" And I was like, "Well, I know of Gail because we have a lot of mutual friends." He's like, No. She runs a Supernatural Facebook group. Why aren't you in it?" And I went, "Well, I don't know." And I'm like, Facebook groups. He's like, "No, seriously, join." And I did. And that led me to, let's see, we were in the car, Gail, 24 hours driving over the last
weekend,
week.
yeah.
Yeah.
And room together. So
And room together. Yeah. So yeah, I fell into the official fandom in joining with, interacting with other fans very late, but I also fell deep and hard. Like, I joined the TFWNC Facebook group that you run, Gail. I was really active. You handed me my very first fanfic to read, and oh my God, that changed my life, because then I met Carole and I met other friends to, stalk and follow and all kinds of things. And that led to doing the first convention, and that led to us doing at least one Supernatural convention a year, watching all the panels. Like, I fell hard and deep into the fandom, the collective of the fandom, as opposed to being a fan all on my own for so many years.
Mhm.
I blame John.
Well, usually that works.
Mhm.
I seem to have come off as an instigator here, but I'm very proud of it. When I fell in love with Supernatural, I knew that part of the fun and the depth of loving a show is finding other people to love it with. And my husband watched with me, but yeah, he thought it was okay, but it didn't grab him. So I had to go find other people to talk about this new obsession with. And I went to a convention 7 years ago now, and hence it became the Supernatural. I started a Facebook group to try to organize people to get together at the convention, and then it just lasted afterwards. Hence, it is the TFWNC, Team Free Will North Carolina, because it was a North Carolina convention. And so that's now 8 years old and going strong. And now it is just a general, you love Supernatural? Come over here. I post a shit ton of stuff every day. Oh, all variety. And, you're welcome. I knew to look for fan fiction. So I started, I went out on Twitter, and that's where I started to find a lot of links. And I wasn't on LiveJournal, but I knew of Archive of Our Own, and I knew how to get to LiveJournal and find things there. And so I started to go on the recommendations of people who were posting on Twitter. So that's where I got to know a number of the fanfic authors. And, I'm an author myself, but you know what? I totally fangirl authors. And so that was great. And then once you find some authors that you like, you go down the rabbit hole of reading all their stuff, and then all the people who, recommend them, pardon me. And somewhere along the line in there, I also met Lynn Zubernis, who is an academic who studies pop culture. And she does talk about more than Supernatural, but mostly she talks about Supernatural. And I think she's writing her 7th book on Supernatural or something like that. And those books are just a loving tribute to the show, the actors, the fandom itself, coming at it through the lens of an academic, saying, what is it about this show that prompts this incredible, long-running, deep-seated emotional connection to the show, the actors, the storyline, to each other, and all the things that, random acts always keep fighting, all these charities, all of the stories about people very seriously saying Supernatural fandom saved their life. That's not hyperbole. A lot of people have come to the show and found what they needed to get through a rough patch. Um, and so I think that's one of the other things that is really notable about the Supernatural fandom is how supportive and overall positive it is. Now, you can find jerks anywhere, but the Supernatural fandom in general is very nurturing and supportive. And you don't find that in every fandom. And people who aren't don't seem to last very long. So I think that that's something else very special about the fandom is um, not that it bills itself as therapeutic, but more so than many other fandoms, if you're looking for community and found family, this fandom does it really well. And it is a wonderful mix of gender and ages and experiences and locations and interests, and people come to the fandom, you know, with different favorite characters and different perspectives, but it's it's just incredibly vibrant and rich, and you keep finding these things that you hadn't found before, even if you've seen the whole series 6 or 7 or 8 times. um Carol, back to you. Something else that just, you know, grabs you or that is special and notable about the Supernatural fandom, and or tips on how newbies can find their way.
Well, I would certainly be remiss if I didn't mention my experiences here on Continual. Gail, I think I said this before one time. I don't remember how we actually met,
I don't either.
but at some point we were communicating online,
Hmm.
and then subsequently we both were at the 2019 DC convention,
Hmm.
and we got to meet face to face, which again, very exciting. And I remotely had no thoughts of ever, you know, being bold enough to publish. So I'm like, oh, she's a published author and she has so many books and all this stuff. And so I was very, uh, enthralled to meet a friend, but also like fangirling myself, and uh, and that, as I said, that was the fall of 2020, right? No, the fall of 2019. So we all know what happened after the holidays of 2020. And Gail and several of her cohorts came up with Continual, which, if you don't know, this is why they created it. There was, nobody could have conventions, and we were all on lockdown. And they created this venue so that people could, meet electronically. We could do Zoom, they could do Zooms, panels. There are the tracks. If you're watching a Supernatural panel, you may not be aware of how many other tracks there are in Continual. Horror, comics, classics, comic books. I mean, just
I mean,
everything you can conceive of having a fandom is represented on Continual. And so early in Continual's infanthood, Gail came to me and asked me to be on a Supernatural panel. And again, I was like, oh my gosh, who, me? And I haven't counted how many panels I'm on, but there's a lot of them. And not only Supernatural, but I also do panels on other fandoms. Buffy is a big fandom of mine, Firefly, niche things like Victorian Gothic horror. I mean, it's just really fun. And this whole venue, again, brought me to a different way to express my fandom, to interact with others about fandom, and meeting a whole bunch of new people again, and I met Melissa, I've met Kristin, and I haven't met Kristin in person, but so there again was another huge vector of fandom that opened. And in my household, we know that Tuesday night is usually panel night. And the exception is I might say, oh, I don't have a panel this week. And everyone's like, oh, really? So Tuesday night is panel night in my house. As far as a newbie, so these days, LiveJournal is I hate to say it because I loved LiveJournal. It was so very, very important to me for so long. I was on LiveJournal years before I was in Supernatural fandom. That's how long I was in it. And Facebook is probably the most accessible, out of the gate, out of the box way to start your fandom experience, because 9 out of 10 people are on Facebook. So you're already on it. You're already using it. You know how it works, you know, and it's just a matter of finding the groups. And there are so many groups. There's groups devoted to certain aspects of things. There are groups that are solely focused on fanfic. So really, if you just want to find fanfic to read and talk about it with people, there are fanfic groups. There are convention groups. Each convention, New Jersey, Charlotte, Vancouver, Boston, has a Facebook group. So if you're going to a convention or you're planning on a convention, you can go join that city's Facebook group and you can find out things about the venue and meet other people who are going to that particular one, and so on and so forth. There are buy and sell groups because, you know, there's always people who are like, wow, I have a lot of supernatural stuff. Let me sell some of it. Or, you know, maybe they're phasing out of the fandom. And at the same time, you've got people phasing into the fandom. And so there's an exchange of goods happening all the time. There are, you know, art, whatever. There is a supernatural group out there, and there, all you have to do is Google, is not Google, but go into Facebook and search supernatural, and you'll get a list of groups, and you can start visiting and seeing which ones jive with you. You know, not every
I
group is for everyone.
I will say, Carol, I'm going to butt in for a second.
Yeah.
Find a group that's well moderated. Like,
Yes.
don't jump into the wild, wild west at first. Those wild, wild west groups are great for some people, but when you're just getting into Facebook fandom groups, find some that are well moderated to start with, whether it's fanfic or whatever that topic is. There are well moderated groups out there, and once you get a feel and a start to build some connections and stuff, then if you want to wander off to the wild, wild west, that's fine. Those, you know, those unmoderated groups are whatever, but and poke around at the groups, and if it's not for you, don't
Yeah.
argue with people. Just, like, you know, walk away. I
Yep.
have other hobbies, and I join a bunch of groups. Like, I'll go through one day and find all the groups related about X, and I'll join them, and within 2 days I'm like, nope, 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 because there's too much traffic, too little
There's,
traffic, they're wild, whatever. So
yeah, there's so many out there that it's, you're going to find the ones that you feel comfortable in and that you
right.
like. So if you're in it for a little bit and then you're not feeling it, that's fine.
It's
Leave
okay.
and find another. And when Melissa's talking about a well-moderated group, you're talking about a group that has some rules, you know, rules about no hate speech, rules about not bullying, rules about respect, which you would think would all be obvious, but oh, they're not. And so if a group has some of these rules, and then if it's a group on a particular topic, it will say, we only want to talk about this thing here. If you would like to talk about that thing there, then, you know, by all means, join more than one group, and then you can fit, you know, fulfill that need here and this need there, and, you know, and that you see the moderators active. You don't want to have a moderator that nobody ever sees or never
Right.
steps in, because if you do get a kerfluffle, and you will, because any group of human beings is going to have kerfluffles. So
Right.
when you have a kerfluffle, you want to know that either you can reach out to the moderator and have them deal with it, or the moderator will simply step in because they're active and they're keeping an eye on things, and they step in and say, hey, this is not cool. You know, go to your own corners and take a cool off, or, you know, whatever they have to do to handle the situation. And that's a well-moderated group.
Okay. Kristen?
Yeah, just to tag on to that, you know, especially for somebody who's just entering the fandom, they're new to the show, they will find that there are factions, sort of like you have the cast girls, the Dean girls, and the Sam girls, and never the twain shall meet. And some of them, there were some pretty big fights and things like that in the old Supernatural CW lounges. There were entire forums dedicated to them, and boy, those were some crazy times. And I'd also
Even
like to
get the
say,
nod in the show when,
oh,
they say there
boy,
are
there,
what, Sam girls and Dean
Dean
girls.
girls and Cass girls and
Yeah.
Sam and
And
Dean
so
and
even in the
Dean
show,
and Cass
nod.
and yeah, it was just there was a lot of craziness. And if you're just starting out too, just know that like hashtags are your friend, especially if you're going onto social media, whether it's Twitter or Blue Sky. You can find community through hashtag like Supernatural, especially SPN family. That's a frequently used one. And you can kind of find your tribe through the hashtags. So those are really great. Um, One thing I'd like to talk about is one of the ways that I think supernatural fandom is completely unique is that you have a fandom like Star Trek or Doctor Who. Both of those are extremely long lived. They have many aspects to them. They have the merch, they have the TV show, they have movies, they have tie-in books. They have I think it was Marvel that did the comic book series for Star Trek. You have endless fanfics and stuff, but in a lot of ways, Supernatural kind of takes all of that and then adds to it in a way that the other shows didn't. Because you have shows out there right now that are all the hottest property, whether it's Squid Games or Game of Thrones or there's a lot of games. Wheel of Time, you had Lost. Lost had very passionate fan base, but when those shows were over, they kind of faded. They faded away. You don't really hear about Lost anymore. There's maybe a core group of fans that still follow and talk and discuss, but Supernatural, it's still going strong. Even though the show has now been gone for what, 5 years now? It feels like it's just yesterday. And people are still discovering today, and they are still finding that same community, which is just as passionate. They're still doing the conventions. They're still writing fanfics. They're still dressing up in cosplay. They have car. We have cars. We have the babies across the country, replicas that are people spend a lot of time putting every detail into that car, so it's just like the show car. We have the cast that's still active. Star Trek is still active. Doctor Who, they, show up at conventions, but not really to the degree that some of the Star Trek people do. But Supernatural is out there doing their own thing, and they're still doing it. So I think there's a uniqueness to this fandom that is just head and shoulders above every other show that has been popular and has inspired a fan base. West Wing, when for a very long time had dedicated fans, but they weren't out there doing conventions. Maybe you had some really entrepreneurial types that were writing fanfic for some ungodly reason. But we have a very special community with this series that I don't think any other series has ever come close to doing.
I think there's two really important factors that play into that. One is Netflix. It's been playing on Netflix for years, and we now have fans and we see them at conventions because Jared and Jensen will be like, oh my God, who were like 5 when the show started, or perhaps not even born yet.
Mhm.
But via Netflix came into the show. And so there's this kind of constant influx of new blood because the show is still, it may be concluded in terms of new material, but it's running and running and running and running and running and, constantly drawing new people in. And I think the other is that even shows that do conventions, and we see Vampire Diaries doing conventions and Star Trek and several of these others, the cast of Supernatural, and it starts with Jared and Jensen all the way down, are really approachable. They're very open. They're very welcoming of the fans. I'm cracking up Melissa somehow, but they're not just up on stage. Don't bother me, you know. Jared and Jensen, when they're there, they have real tight schedules. So they're not like, it's not like they're hanging out with people and stuff. But even still, even during their question and answer sessions are clearly open. They're just being themselves, they're having a good time. And then everybody else in the cast is happy to be there, and it shows, and they're not only just there, but they're doing events, and uh, does creation set these up and charge for them? Absolutely. But you know what? Here's like, 50 people having an intimate event with somebody they really like on the cast. Maybe it's Rowena's Witching Hour, or there's a few of them. Davies Have Dinner with Davy.
Yep.
You know, and that promotes that sense of you get to spend time with these people a little bit, and the people are enjoying it. So they're not just doing it like, yeah, I'm here doing this thing, but like, don't really talk to me because I'm just like taking the paycheck. That's not what you get from them. And I think between those two things, the constant influx of new fans because of the Netflix and the downright approachability of the cast themselves, that I feel is really pretty unique. I've not seen that to the same degree that you see it at supernatural conventions. It really helps foster, again, that whole, supernatural family, we're all in this together kind of feeling.
Can I build on that? That I think too, one of the, unique things about this show and this community, this fandom, is that the actors too have gained something from this show that other actors in other shows don't have. And it's not just the conventions. I think what Jensen kind of discovered his love of singing in front of people and opened himself up to that experience in the convention. He had never done that before. And I remember it was like the first time he was like, "Oh, I'm really nervous. I don't want to do this. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to sing. I might be weird. It's just
He
a
even said,
feeling."
pretend you're not here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now he's
you
like,
can go on YouTube
he's
and search
the
it out, where here's
yeah,
Jensen on his little folding chair with a
yeah,
little microphone and his guitar, and he's like this, like someone's
yes,
and
yeah,
singing like this, and we're like, you can sing louder and stuff.
yeah.
And
It was
you
crazy. And
watch
then he
him
got
now.
onto social media
Yeah.
on stage, live
Yep.
on stage. They
Yep.
got him on, opened his first Twitter account and his first post right there with the audience. So everybody experienced that moment with him. And Jared with Always Keep Fighting. I mean, he had his own problem, and he used his position and his voice to turn this into a movement that helped countless other people. And then Misha with his whole crazy, nutso random acts that changed people's, lives in very fundamental ways, really by like building a community center in Haiti. Oh my God, that's just crazy. But he marshaled people to be able to do that. And, it's like not only have we as fans gotten something out of this, but the actors have too.
Mhm.
And it's changed their lives in meaningful ways and given them something that you don't see other actors in other shows. They're not necessarily out there being an active part of their own community, like we are here with Supernatural.
Melissa?
I forgot what even the question was. I'm sorry.
I think we've moved past a question, and we're
It
just
wasn't
like,
really a question. It was anything else you wanted to tell people about getting into the fandom?
Yes. So there are all these different, there's a large swath of the fandom. It's just general, I love the show, I want to talk about the show, general fandom. And then there are all these niches and pockets and things. And if a niche or a pocket isn't your jam, that's fine. It's not your jam. And when you're entering the fandom, if you come across these pockets that don't work for you, that's fine. Just move on. You don't have to be mean to the people whose that niche or pocket is their jam. It's like if you don't like Brussels sprouts, you don't eat Brussels sprouts and you move on. And you're not walking around criticizing Brussels sprouts about how awful Brussels sprouts are. Same thing is true with fandom. If this pocket or niche doesn't work for you, cool. Go find the things that do work for you, that you love, and enjoy them, and don't be, dissing the Brussels sprouts, because you know what? Those folks who love Brussels sprouts really love Brussels sprouts, and they're entitled to it. Now, me, Brussels sprouts ain't my jam, but that's okay, because I'm gonna be over here with the bacon.
There you go. And you never know, maybe if you poured maple syrup on the Brussels sprouts or the actor, it would change your mind. Maple
The
syrup.
Bacon and Brussels sprouts are actually really good together when you roast them.
And with maple syrup, yes, indeed. I think folks have covered quite a bit, but just a couple of recommendations. Certainly if you like reading the extended adventures of Sam and Dean in all manner of ways, places, and interpersonal relationships, look for fan fiction, Archive of Our Own. There's still some stuff on LiveJournal. There's even some stuff on Tumblr. You can find it, and there's still some stuff on fanfiction.net. As you get backward in some of the older sites, the tech has not been updated. In that way, Archive of Our Own is the best. But there are thousands of stories for any, you like case fic, there's case fic. You like creature, there's creatures, all kinds of stuff. There are the licensed book series. There are, I think, 12 books in the series. There's also a graphic novel. Those are all standard licensed. There are podcasts. There's Rich and Rob from the show. Do Supernatural Then and Now. What's the one that they do? I just looked this up. Yeah, Supernatural Then and Now. They've been doing that for years, and they do different episodes with the cast, the crew. It's Richard Speight Jr. and Rob Benedict, so Gabriel and God. And they, that's out there on Apple Podcasts. They have multiple years worth of content. There's also Denim Wrapped Nightmares, which is a supernatural podcast, and Driving in the Impala, another supernatural podcast. Here on Continual, we've been doing this for 5 years. We do a new supernatural episode almost every week. So, whatever that turns out to be times 5 years, we've done a heck of a lot. And those are here on Facebook in the group. I replay them to my Supernatural TFWNC group on Facebook, and they're on my YouTube channel in a Supernatural playlist. So, there is so much stuff there. Lynn Zubernis's 6, soon to be 7 books on the fandom, looking at it from an academic perspective. So kind of standing outside, lovingly looking in, trying to figure out how this crazy ball of twine works. If you're worried about the show going off of Netflix, grab the DVDs while you can. But the buzz on the street is that it's probably going to show up on another streaming platform like HBO, because that's what creation tends to do. The creation conventions, if you look for creation entertainment, you'll find those. And the stars show up sometimes in 1s and 2s at other conventions as well. So keep an eye out. If you can't make it to a creation convention, but there is a Galaxy Con or a Dragon Con or a big weekend fandom convention in a city near you, sometimes Jared, Jensen, some of the other stars will show up for the weekend. It's not the same as having all the cast there together or having a whole weekend dedicated to just the show. But hey, you get to see them. And they do quite a number of those in addition to the creation conventions. And then there are, like everybody mentioned, the discussion groups on Facebook, and they're still out there on Twitter and some other places. So you can find fans even if nobody in your immediate and Kitty is a big fan. We know this. So even if the people around you aren't yet, because you will win them over eventually or wear them down, you can find community. And that's one of the best things about this fandom is the community. Well, folks, we have run a little over time, which is perfectly fine. But before we leave, let's let everybody know where we can find you and your fandom related stuff online. Carole?
You can find me on Facebook, especially in Continual and in the TFWNC group. All of my fanfic is still on AO3 under Firesign 10. Mind the tags. And as Ellis Colton, my most recent book, The Case of Thistledown House, is available on Amazon and Smashwords, where two young men are going around and facing evil in the dark. And the sequel, The Malevolent Sea, will be out in June.
Kristin?
You can find me at AnyCat68 on Blue Sky. I do have a few little fan fictions that I wrote myself on fanfiction.net. And I'm going to be a pro guest at DragonCon this year. And I'll definitely be in one of Carole's supernatural panels. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Melissa?
You can find Kitty and I here on Continual talking about Supernatural, or me, because she can't type, on a Facebook group, TFWNC. Oh gosh, Gail, what is it? TFWNC.
That's
Supernatural
Is it
TFWNC.
I knew I was missing a word.
Facebook.com/supernatural TFWNC. There you go.
Thanks.
I'm pretty easy to find online at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. If you spell those right, you'll find me on all the social media. I'm always here on Continual. I am going to be at a number of conventions later this summer: Con Carolinas, Congregate, Dragon Con. If there are panels on Supernatural, they usually know to put me on them. So you can look for me there. And as Morgan Bright, well, as both Gail and Morgan, I write urban fantasy, which is, people hunting ghosts and monsters and doing all of this. And all my modern day worlds are ones that Sam and Dean could walk into, feel right at home, pick up a shotgun and go, hey, you need some help with that chupacabra? And they'd fit right in. Chupacabra.
Oh,
David Hayden-Jones originally had some problems saying that. We heard all about it at the convention.
Chupacabra.
So folks, thank you so much for, thanks to my wonderful, wonderful panelists, and thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon, so we'll see you online.